Souleater, Part 1. The sun hangs lazily in the sky, casting golden hues that trickle through the canopy of leaves overhead. The road stretches ahead, quiet and undisturbed, winding its way through a town that feels suspended in time. There is a stillness here, an almost unnatural serenity that pulls you in deeper with each step. The air is warm, the kind of warmth that soothes the skin and lulls the mind into a sense of safety. You can hear the distant chirping of birds, their song mingling with the soft rustle of leaves, as if the world itself is whispering secrets just beyond the edge of perception. You walk slowly, savoring the peacefulness, the weight of your book comforting in your hand. You've been searching for a place, a quiet nook where the world's chaos can be left behind, even if only for a few moments. And then you see it, a bench, old and worn, nestled beneath the shade of an ancient oak. An elderly man sits there alone, his back slightly hunched, his eyes, twinkling beneath a brow lined with age, meet yours. There's a warmth in his gaze, one that feels disconcertingly familiar, like the gentle recognition of an old friend, or the sense of déjà vu that comes with a half-forgotten dream. The bench seems to call out to you, its wood inviting and cool in the shade. It's exactly what you were looking for. And yet it's not just the bench, it's the man himself. There's a pull, an almost magnetic force in his presence, subtle but undeniable. You feel it tugging at the corners of your mind, urging you to close the distance. Your feet move without conscious thought, and before you realize it, you find yourself standing before him. He smiles, a simple gesture, but there's something in it that speaks of knowing, as if he's been waiting for this moment, waiting for you. You nod, feeling an odd sense of obligation to acknowledge him, to take the spot beside him. The wood creaks softly under your weight as you sit, the world around you slipping into a curious quiet, as if holding its breath. The sunlight, once so warm and embracing, now feels strangely heavy, as if the day itself is watching. The old man's voice is soft, like the murmur of a stream, and there's a lilting quality to it, as if he's savoring each word before releasing it into the world. "Do you enjoy stories?" he asks, his eyes locking onto yours with an intensity that feels almost unnatural. "I used to be quite the storyteller, you know. But these days, well, opportunities are few and far between." His smile widens, a fleeting flicker of something nostalgic crossing his features, and for a moment it feels like he's both here and somewhere far away. You feel a thrill at his offer, the kind of excitement that only comes when you stumble upon something unexpectedly special. It's a rare thing to be invited into a tale by a stranger, with the look of a seasoned traveler of worlds. You nod eagerly, the anticipation of what he might say, sending a ripple of excitement through you. "I'd love to hear your story," you say, and the old man's eyes twinkle, as if you've just passed a test you didn't know you were taking. He leans closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Let me tell you a story about yourself," he begins, and there's a weight to his words, like a door creaking open to reveal something long hidden. "Come with me for a moment. Put yourself in the protagonist's shoes. Imagine—" His voice seems to pull you in, the world around you blurring at the edges as his words form images in your mind. You see yourself standing alone on a small forest glade, a figure approaching. The stranger is cloaked in shadows cast by the trees as he walks toward you. Only as he almost reaches you does the light reveal him fully. His face benign, yet remarkable, devoid of distinct features, as if he was spared all the burden life casts upon every soul throughout their earthly journey. A true stranger, dressed in an immaculate clean suit made of shiny black velvet. You can't help but feel the suit somehow doesn't quite fit the way he should. He reaches out, offering you a pair of goggles. They are unlike anything you've ever seen, shaped like two half-spheres, their surface composed of small hexagonal plates that catch the light and shimmer with a vibrant pink tint. The goggles rest in his hands, the lenses mounted on what looks like old-fashioned welding gear, the leather straps cracked and weathered with age. Despite their antiquity, the glass is pristine, immaculate, a sharp, diamond-like clarity that seems impossible for something so old. "Why would I wear something like this?" you hear yourself ask, the words feeling strange as they leave your lips. They look ridiculous, like something that would make me look like a bug. The old man's smile deepens as he describes this, the corners of his eyes crinkling. He seems to relish this moment, this exact point where curiosity blooms. "Ah," he says, but the stranger has an answer for that. He tells you that these goggles will let you see behind the veil, to understand the world as it truly is. But, he pauses, his tone growing grave, he warns you. Once you see, you cannot unsee. There will be no forgetting, no returning to ignorance. This is a one-time offer, he says. Choose wisely. The stranger's warning echoes in your mind, a whisper that twists into the shadows of doubt as you stare at the goggles in your hand. They feel heavier than they should, as if holding the weight of a decision that stretches beyond the simple act of putting them on. For a moment, you hesitate, but curiosity is a fickle thing, and the more you try to resist, the more it burrows into you, urging you forward. You take a deep breath, the air suddenly feeling cold as it fills your lungs, and lift the goggles to your eyes. The world shifts, subtly at first. The ground beneath your feet, covered in tufts of grass and patches of dirt, is tinted in a soft, almost rosy hue. Everything is bathed in this strange pink glow, and for a brief moment you feel a wave of relief. It's nothing, you think, just a trick of light. The grass sways gently in the breeze, and your shadow stretches before you, tinged in the same shade. It's almost calming. But then you lift your gaze. The sky, once a comforting expanse of blue, is gone. Not replaced, gone, like a memory erased from the mind. In its place, there is the blackness of space, a yawning void that presses down with a weight that's not entirely physical. You feel it like a pressure building in your chest, making each breath harder to draw. The sun hangs there, suspended like a ghost. It's enormous, far larger than it should be, its edges not sharply defined but blurred, as if it were formed from smoke or mist. Its light is dim, smothered by a fog that pulses with an otherworldly glow. And the color, it defies everything you've known. It hovers on the edge of perception, slipping through the cracks of understanding. Your eyes struggle, your mind fumbling to place it within the spectrum you've always known. It flits between violet and light blue, but those labels feel wrong, inadequate. It's a color that exists not just for the eyes, but for something deeper, something in the mind or even beyond it. It resonates within you, a feeling as much as a sight, and it sends a shiver down your spine. The warmth of the day evaporates, leaving a chill that sinks into your bones. The air is colder now, and each gust feels like a whisper against your skin, a reminder of how fragile, how small you are in this vast altered world. You blink, trying to clear the image, but the blackness and that impossible sun remain, fixed in place, as unmovable as the truth they seem to reveal. A sense of dread coils in your stomach as you tear the goggles from your face. The warmth of the day floods back in, the sky a familiar blue, the sun shining benignly as it always has. For a moment, you almost laugh at the absurdity of it, at the way your heart races as if you've just glimpsed something impossible. The world is normal again, a comforting blanket of light and sound. The birds chirp, the leaves sway gently in the breeze, and everything is exactly as it should be. But the memory of what you saw lingers, like the aftertaste of a dream you can't quite shake. Slowly, almost hesitantly, you lift the goggles back to your eyes, this time peeking through one lens as if afraid of what you might find. And there it is, the world cracks open, revealing the truth that lurks beneath the surface. The sky vanishes once more, replaced by the vast, starless expanse of space, and that impossibly large, fog-wrapped sun floats, its glow a spectral beacon against the dark. You pull the goggles away, your breath quickening as the sky returns to its familiar state, and then you lift them again, your curiosity clawing at you. The shift is instant, like the flip of a switch. There's no denying it. Something lies hidden behind this reality, something far beyond the scope of understanding. As you press the goggles fully over your eyes once more, your gaze locks onto the sun, its color again tugging at the edges of your mind. You're so focused on it that you almost miss the movement, a flicker of something at the periphery of your vision. It's subtle, like a shiver in the fabric of space, but it's enough to pull your attention away. When you turn, the breath catches in your throat. Floating in the vast darkness, you see them, colossal structures, their size beyond comprehension, drifting as if suspended in a cosmic ocean. They aren't like planets or moons, they are different, more intricate, massive. Each one dwarfs anything you've ever seen, their surfaces textured like the tangled fractal patterns of frost on a window pane. They're connected by bridges, not of stone or steel, but of something translucent, something that shimmers and pulses as if alive. The structures stretch across the sky, forming a web that seems to ensnare the earth itself, delicate strands crisscrossing like the threads of some vast cosmic spider's trap. The patterns they form resemble molecules, gigantic twisting shapes that hint at an intelligence, a purpose, that eludes your understanding. The longer you look, the more the shapes seem to shift, revealing new forms, new patterns, an ever-changing geometry that makes your head ache, as if your mind struggles to hold on to an understanding it isn't meant to grasp. The fractal surfaces ripple, catching the light of the strange sun, and you realize that the structures aren't static. They breathe, they pulse. You can't determine how far they extend, but their presence feels oppressive, like a secret pressing against your thoughts, demanding to be acknowledged. The vastness of the structures defies comprehension. You try to estimate their size, but perspective becomes a slippery concept when confronted with the immensity of the void. Some appear close enough to blot out entire sections of the sky, while others are mere specks in the distance, tethered by thin, glowing strands that twist and curl like cosmic vines. Your mind grasps for comparisons, mountains, moons, continents, but nothing fits. They hover between familiar and alien, their surfaces textured with ridges and swirling patterns that shift like sand dunes under an invisible wind. A cold sweat beads on your brow as your gut churns, whispering truths your rational mind refuses to accept. Some of these structures are at least as large as the moon, if not larger. Or, what if those behemoths that seem to linger in the distance are in fact the size of planets? They hang there, ominous and silent, like the carcasses of colossal beasts frozen mid-motion. Others are smaller, almost too small to see, and yet they are there, connected by the filaments, their presence betrayed only by the way they tug and ripple in the dark, like threads of a web catching the breath of something vast and unseen. It's impossible to say whether these things are natural formations crafted by some unknowable force, or the abandoned relics of a civilization that has long since vanished. They bear no resemblance to anything within the realm of earthly architecture, and their forms evade categorization, like shapes glimpsed in a half-remembered dream. Some surfaces gleam like polished metal, while others seem to absorb the light entirely, rendering them indistinct shadows against the black. As you stare, the strangeness of it all begins to blur the lines between what is real and what might be a trick of perception. The more you focus, the less sense they make, and you feel a creeping unease settle in your chest. The very act of observing feels wrong, as if you're not supposed to look, not supposed to notice the architecture of the hidden world veiled beyond your own. Then, something changes. Among the structures you begin to see movement. At first it's subtle, just a few glints of light darting between the massive forms, but soon more appear, tiny sparkling dots that weave in and out of the web, moving with a purpose that feels disturbingly alive. They resemble fireflies flickering against the night sky, but there's an unnatural precision to their motion, an eerie mechanical grace that sends shivers down your spine. The longer you watch, the more numerous they become, crisscrossing paths and flitting between the earth and the structures above like a swarm of insects. Each spark leaves a faint trail of light in its wake, a residual glow that lingers just a heartbeat too long, like a warning flare. You squint, trying to track their movements. When you realize some of them are descending, a cold thrill courses through you as you follow their trajectory. They move fast, faster than physically possible, and with a horrifying certainty you see that some are coming toward you. Your pulse quickens, the chill of the air biting through your skin. They draw closer, and the world around you begins to feel fragile, as if reality itself is thinning, its fabric stretching under the weight of their approach. The sparkling dots fall from the sky like meteors, each one streaking through the dark, their trails burning brightly against the infinite blackness above. Most disappear beyond the horizon, their destination far from where you stand, but a few, the ones that matter, plunge downward, homing in on your location. You feel the ground beneath your feet grow cold, the chill spreading through your body, locking your limbs in place. Every instinct screams at you to run, to flee from whatever is coming, but you can't move. It's as if the air itself has thickened, holding you in its grip, pinning you in place as these alien sparks descend. Time slows to a crawl as one of the lights breaks from the others, arcing toward you. It moves with a frightening precision, adjusting its trajectory as it draws closer. It's no longer just a point of light. It expands, growing into a solid mass until it hovers mere feet from the ground. Its surface, like the structures in the sky, ripples with a fractal complexity that defies focus. Your eyes try to make sense of it, but each glance yields a new configuration, a chaotic dance of angles and patterns, as if the thing is perpetually in the act of becoming. It lands with a soft hum, a whisper of energy vibrating through the earth. You stare, your breath hitching in your throat as the object's shape stabilizes, if only for a moment. It isn't much larger than a motorcycle, its form twisted and unnatural, a lump of what looks like machinery, but could just as easily be organic. Cables coil and uncoil, and surfaces shift like the skin of a living creature. Yet it all moves with the calculated precision of a device built for a purpose you cannot begin to fathom. Your gaze moves to its passenger, and your heart pounds as you try to comprehend what you're seeing. The figure atop the techno-beast is monstrous, a towering shape that flickers and wavers, its form refusing to settle. At first it seems reptilian, its skin covered in scales that shimmer like oil on water, its eyes narrow and predatory. But then it changes, its shape warping like a reflection in a broken mirror. It stretches, its limbs elongating, and suddenly it's no longer reptilian, but something else entirely. It becomes a giant mantis, its serrated claws twitching with a disturbing insectile rhythm. No sooner do you register its new form than it shifts again, becoming a spider, its eyes multiplying, its mouth filled with fangs that seem to drip with a venomous intent. A second later, it melts into the shape of a snake, coiling and uncoiling, its tongue flicking out as if tasting the fear in the air. And then, just as quickly, it morphs into a dragon-like creature, wings spreading wide, its body rippling with sinewy strength. The transitions come faster and faster, each one more grotesque, more alien than the last. It is as if your mind, unable to comprehend the true nature of this entity, is cycling through every nightmare image stored in the recesses of your subconscious. It becomes a bat, a lizard, a grotesque fusion of both, and then something else, something that defies all classification, a form that blurs like a half-remembered silhouette from a dream that twists into a nightmare just as you start to recall it. You can feel your pulse hammering in your veins, the adrenaline pushing against the invisible chains that hold you in place. The creature's form shifts through every monstrous archetype your mind can conjure. And yet, the truth remains maddeningly out of reach. It is like staring into the void and feeling it stare back, indifferent and ancient. You feel as though time has slowed, each second stretching into an eternity as you watch the creature land its vehicle with a soft, mechanical hiss. The surface of the earth beneath it quivers, as if repelled by its presence, the grass curling away like dying tendrils. The vehicle remains a writhing mass of metallic tendons and organic sinew, an abominable marriage of flesh and machinery. It hums with a quiet, alien energy that seems to vibrate in your very bones. Fear grips you tighter than any physical restraint. Every nerve in your body screams for you to tear the goggles from your face, to bolt away from this horror, but you are anchored, as if rooted to the spot. The weight of the unseen force presses down, paralyzing your muscles, turning your legs into lead. It's not the usual fear that sparks a flight response. It is the kind that lulls you into submission, numbing your senses until you are nothing but a spectator to your own fate. The creature's presence is suffocating. Your skin tingles with an unnatural chill, the air around it feeling different, thinner, heavier, like it's been altered simply by this thing's arrival. Despite the terror thrumming in your veins, you realize, with a strange sort of detachment, that it doesn't seem to care about you. It moves about, shifting its form in that impossible way, its body flickering through shapes with a fluidity that defies logic, but it shows no interest in your existence. It's as if you are nothing more than a shadow in its peripheral vision. This realization brings with it an unsettling mixture of relief and unease. Relief because for now you are spared from whatever intent this being harbors. Unease because its indifference implies a greater, incomprehensible purpose. You are not the target, not the prey, at least not yet. The longer you watch, the more you feel a creeping sense of wrongness bleed into your thoughts. There's something about the way it moves, the way it occupies space. It does not adhere to the simple rules of the world you know. Its limbs extend, bend and twist, but not in any way that seems natural. There's a disjointedness to its motion, as if it exists in multiple states simultaneously. It moves, but the movement feels like a delayed echo of emotion that hasn't quite finished, or hasn't quite begun. And then, in the stillness of your paralysis, a thought slithers into your mind. It's not the creature that's strange, it's your perception of it. Your brain, unable to comprehend its true form, fills in the gaps with the most terrifying imagery it can summon. You realize with growing dread that your mind is imposing these shapes onto the creature, warping its reality into one your primal instincts recognize as monstrous. It is like looking into a mirror that only reflects the deepest, most ancient fears buried in the human psyche. But even as the rational part of you grapples with this understanding, the instinctual part recoils. It doesn't matter if the horror is self-imposed. The fear is real. Your body remains frozen, the terror coursing through your veins as palpable as ice, as you are forced to confront the uncomfortable truth. You are gazing upon something beyond your comprehension, and your mind is breaking itself to make sense of it. The realization dawns on you like a blade slicing through the fog of confusion. What you are seeing is not real, not in the way you think. The creature's shape, Its shifting and writhing is not some natural transformation, but rather a distortion, one created by the limitations of your own mind. Your thoughts stumble over this truth, fighting to accept it, but there's a clarity now, a sickening clarity that you can't ignore. The creature isn't changing, it's you who is doing the changing. Your mind, confronted with something so utterly alien, so fundamentally beyond the scope of human perception, is reaching for the only tools it has, fear and instinct. It dredges up the most primal shapes, the most nightmarish archetypes it can summon from the depths of your unconscious. Snakes, spiders, lizards, all twisted and exaggerated by centuries of evolutionary dread. The world around you seems to darken, as if the knowledge itself has drawn shadows from every corner, creeping toward you. You feel your consciousness narrowing, tunneling down into something older, something raw. It's a primitive part of your brain that awakens now, clawing its way to the forefront. Your heartbeat echoes like a drum in your ears, loud and fast, a desperate rhythm meant to keep you alive. It is as if you are no longer a person but an animal, a terrified, cornered beast trying to make sense of the impossible. For a moment, it's as if you're experiencing the world as your ancestors did, back when the line between predator and prey was razor thin, when survival was a matter of instinct and reaction. You feel what it must have been like to be prey, a small, helpless creature seeing the shadow of a predator loom overhead, its shape too monstrous to comprehend. You imagine yourself as one of those early primates, caged in a lab, staring out at the incomprehensible beings beyond the glass. Creatures that towered over them in sterile suits, faces obscured, voices muffled, and intentions unreadable. There's a chilling empathy in this connection, a sense of shared helplessness, of being a specimen observed by something you cannot understand. Your skin prickles as the air itself seems to thicken, becoming oppressive, smothering your senses. You are thrown into the past, into the animal state that dominated the minds of your distant ancestors, a state where there are only two choices, fight or flee. But you can do neither. This is a terror that goes beyond the physical. It's the terror of confronting a truth too vast for the human mind to encompass. Your instincts scream at you to retreat, to escape the confines of your own perception, but there's nowhere to go. Your senses betray you, each one twisting what you see into a grotesque tapestry that reflects only your deepest fears. And through it all, the creature remains, indifferent to your horror. It is not here for you. It never was. It exists beyond the boundaries of your understanding, a presence that doesn't belong within the small, tidy rules of your world. It's as if you've glimpsed a corner of a map meant for another dimension, and your mind, in its desperation, fills the void with terror. No matter how much you focus, how desperately you try to fix your gaze, the creature refuses to resolve into a coherent shape. It slips through the gaps of perception, like trying to clutch water in your hands. You realize that it isn't just a matter of appearance. It's the way it exists, its presence somehow extending beyond the simple, three-dimensional understanding of space. It's like trying to view an apple from every angle at once. Your mind knows that the unseen part exists, yet no matter how you strain your senses, something remains hidden, something that exists in a dimension beyond your grasp. You blink, your eyes watering as they struggle to keep up with the shifting reality around the entity. It's not just that you can't comprehend it. It's as if it's deliberately eluding you. An enigma folded into layers of space and time that you weren't designed to unravel. The feeling is maddening, a pull at the edges of your consciousness, like staring into an abyss that stretches not just forward and back, but through planes of existence you never knew were there. Then, through the pink tint of the goggles, you begin to notice its effect on the world around it. The tree nearest to the creature, A sturdy oak with gnarled branches shivers as though caught in a wind that doesn't touch anything else. At first you assume it's just the distortion of the lenses, some trick of light bending through the pink glass. But the longer you look, the more you realize it's something else, something real. The tree's bark takes on a faint silvery glow, as if a thin membrane of moonlight clings to its surface. It shimmers, delicate and ethereal, barely perceptible unless you strain your eyes. As the creature lingers, the light shifts. The silver sheen fades, replaced by a subtle, sickly reddish hue that pulses like the heartbeat of something alive. The tree itself seems to recoil, its branches curling inward, the leaves darkening as though infected by the creature's presence. The grass around its roots wilts, shrinking away from where the entity stands, as if all life senses the intruder and retreats. This isn't just the goggles enhancing your perception, this is the reality they reveal. The creature's very existence disrupts the world around it, bending nature into new and unnatural forms. You begin to understand that it isn't just an invader of your vision, but of your reality itself, warping the fabric of the environment as if testing how much it can reshape before the world itself pushes back. The reddish glow intensifies, and you feel an almost magnetic pull toward it, like an invisible thread tugging at your senses. It's both fascinating and horrifying, the way life itself dims and twists around this thing. You begin to wonder, if the tree can react, then what about you? Are you too changing just by standing in its presence, breathing the air it distorts? A shiver runs down your spine as you consider the implications. You realize that while the creature may seem indifferent to you, its influence is anything but passive. Its effect, subtle and pervasive, reaches into the world and you are caught in its radius. The thought that you might already be altered, that you might be unraveling in some way you cannot see, tightens the knot of fear in your chest. A tremor runs through your limbs, a sudden twitch that breaks the paralysis holding you in place. Slowly, as if emerging from a fog, you begin to feel your hands and feet again, the numbness receding as the wave of terror that had seized your body begins to fade. With a shuddering breath, you summon the strength to reach for the goggles. Your fingers, still shaking, fumble against the leather straps as you wrench them from your face, almost ripping them off in your haste. The world shifts once more, instantly, mercifully. The oppressive darkness vanishes, and the warmth of the sun pours over you again, a flood of light and familiarity that soothes your frayed nerves. The sky is a vast blue canvas, unmarred by any hint of the cosmic horror you glimpsed just moments before. The tree stands as it should, its bark a rough, comforting brown, its leaves a lush green that rustles gently in the breeze. The grass is bright and full of life, swaying in the warm currents that feel so safe, so real. You suck in a deep breath, relief washing over you in a wave. The nightmare fades as quickly as it appeared, dissipating like mist in the morning light. It's as if the world itself reassures you, whispering that everything is as it should be, that the horrors you saw were nothing more than an illusion, a trick played on your senses. For a moment, you allow yourself to believe it. But then, as the trembling in your knees grows stronger, you sink to the ground, your legs no longer able to support you. You stare at the earth, the soft soil, and the familiar blades of grass, trying to ground yourself in their reality. Yet the confusion lingers, a gnawing thought that burrows deeper with each passing second. What just happened? You hold the goggles in your hands, their weight somehow both light and heavy, as if they carry the memory of the other world within their frame. You turn them over, examining them for some sign of trickery. A hidden screen, a mechanism, anything that could explain the visions they conjured. But there is nothing. The lenses are thin, the pink material amateurishly glued to the edges of what looks like standard run-of-the-mill welding goggles. the kind you could find in any hardware store. There are no wires, no circuitry, nothing to suggest that they could transform the world in the way you just witnessed. Your hands clench around them, your grip tightening as if you could crush the answers out of their frame. But they remain stubbornly ordinary, no more magical or mysterious than any other piece of scrap metal and glass. The simplicity of it is maddening. It's as if the very mundane nature of the goggles mocks the experience you just had, as if the universe itself is daring you to doubt what you saw. The warmth of the sun feels almost too bright now, the world's cheerfulness clashing with the shadow that still lingers in your mind. You feel the chill of that shadow tug at the edges of your thoughts, whispering that what you glimpsed is not so easily dismissed. The grass beneath your fingertips is soft and real, but the memory of its silvery glow under the creature's influence is still fresh, like an after-image burnt into your vision. For now, you breathe. You sit and cling to the normality around you, trying to convince yourself that the world remains intact, that everything is just as it was before. Yet a part of you knows, deep down, that something has shifted. You have seen beyond the veil, and even if the world looks unchanged, you are not. With a mixture of dread and curiosity, you raise the goggles to your eyes once more, peering through their pink-tinted lenses at the place where the creature and its bizarre vehicle had landed. Your pulse quickens, the memory of its impossible form still fresh in your mind. But when you look, there is nothing. No hulking, techno-organic mass shifting and writhing. No trace of the creature that had defied understanding. The grass lies undisturbed, swaying gently in the breeze, the earth beneath it smooth and unmarked. There are no signs of the vehicle's weight, no scorched patches or crushed blades of grass. It is as if the whole event was nothing more than a mirage, a phantom conjured from the depths of your own fear. A chill settles in your chest as you realize that, in the absence of any evidence, it would be easy to convince yourself that it never happened, that your mind played tricks on you, showing you things that were never there. But you know what you saw. The image lingers, vivid and real, like an imprint burned into your senses. The memory of the way the grass withered, of the silver light bleeding into red, it's all too sharp to dismiss as illusion. And yet, the world looks so ordinary now, so stubbornly unchanged, that it feels as though you are caught between two realities, the one you knew before and the one you glimpsed through the goggles. You lower the goggles slowly, resting them in your lap. Your hands tremble slightly, the remnants of fear still coursing through you, but you force yourself to close your eyes and breathe deeply. The air fills your lungs, warm and steadying, as you try to tether yourself to the present, to the blue sky, the sunlight, the gentle whisper of the wind in the trees. You repeat the words in your mind like a mantra, a desperate chant meant to anchor you. Everything is fine. It's still the same. The world hasn't changed. You cling to the simplicity of those words, forcing yourself to believe them, to banish the creeping unease that threatens to unravel your sanity. It's just a sunny day. There's nothing more. There's nothing hidden. But even as you whisper these reassurances to yourself, a part of you remains unconvinced. The memory of the creature's presence, the way the world seemed to warp around it, those things don't fade. They linger like an echo in your thoughts, a faint gnawing doubt that the world you see is merely a facade, a fragile mask over something infinitely stranger and far more terrifying. You open your eyes again, and for a brief moment, you hesitate to pick up the goggles. What if you put them on again and the world shatters once more? What if, this time, you can't come back from whatever lies beyond that veil? The goggles sit heavy in your hands, and you can feel the pull of curiosity tugging at you again, a whisper in the back of your mind, daring you to look just one more time. But for now, you resist. You place the goggles beside you and focus on the tangible, on the reality you can touch, breathe, and feel. You tell yourself that it's enough, that the world is still as it was, right? You turn, and there he is. The stranger, standing just a few steps behind you, as if he's been there all along. His presence is almost unsettling in its familiarity. There's something unchanged, almost serene, about the way he stands, his hands resting lightly in his pockets. His eyes meet yours, and within them you see an unsettling combination of emotions. Compassion tinged with a deep, knowing concern, but also a flicker of amusement, as if he's seen this reaction many times before and finds it both inevitable and, in some way, comforting. Your breath comes fast and shallow, the remnants of fear still coiled tight in your chest. You raise the goggles, shaking them in your hand as if the motion might force an explanation from him. The words tumble out of your mouth, frantic and sharp. "What is this? What is this?" It's the only phrase you can manage, your mind too cluttered with fragments of impossible images, questions that refuse to solidify into anything coherent. You feel a rising frustration, an urgent need to make sense of the madness you've witnessed, but the answers slip through your grasp like sand. The panic builds, and all you can do is repeat the question, the same words over and over again. What is this? The phrase echoes between you, each repetition growing more desperate, as if by sheer force of will you might extract the truth from the stranger's inscrutable gaze. His expression softens, and he holds up a hand, a gentle gesture meant to calm. "Easy now," he says, his voice a low, soothing murmur that barely cuts through the roar of your own thoughts. "It's all right, breathe." But you can't calm yourself. The more you look at him, the more you feel a rising sense of betrayal. He knew. The thought stabs through the confusion, sharp and undeniable. He knew exactly what you would see when you put on the goggles, and yet he offered them to you anyway. He watched as you unraveled, as the world twisted and bent under the weight of things you weren't meant to see. The mix of compassion and amusement in his eyes feels like a taunt, a reminder that he stands on the other side of an invisible line, a line you've just crossed, and while you flail, grasping for answers, he remains unshaken, an anchor in the storm of your confusion. You wave the goggles again, the lenses catching the sunlight and scattering it into fragmented rainbows that flash in the corners of your eyes. "What is this?" you demand once more, and this time the question feels like a plea, a cry for some semblance of understanding. But even as you speak, you know that whatever answer he gives, it won't be simple. It won't fit neatly into the world you knew before. The stranger sighs, a weary sound that seems to carry the weight of countless explanations given to those who have peered beyond the veil. He gestures toward the goggles, and his tone shifts to one of patient instruction, like a teacher guiding a student through a lesson. "The pink material," he begins, tapping the lenses lightly with a finger, "is a filter of sorts. It transforms light that is usually invisible to you, into something you can perceive." He watches your reaction, gauging whether his words are sinking in. "This light," he continues, "does not typically interact with your world. It's not detectable by your eyes, your instruments, or any of your senses. It's there, but it's like a ghost, unseen, intangible." He pauses, his gaze locking onto yours, ensuring you're following. "Only when it passes through this pink material does it become visible. It's as simple as that, nothing more, nothing less." The simplicity of his explanation feels almost insulting. It's too neat, too straightforward, like placing a small bandage over a gaping wound. You nod slowly, forcing yourself to grasp at the logic, to wrap your mind around the idea that something as innocuous as tinted glass could reveal such horrors. It feels like understanding the mechanism of a lock without ever seeing the door it opens. But what about what I saw, you ask, your voice quieter now, the edge of panic giving way to something colder, more introspective. That world, those things, they were real, weren't they? The stranger's eyes shift, a glint of something almost sad flickering in their depths. Yes, he replies, and there's no amusement in his voice now, only a heavy sincerity. What you saw is as real as this world, perhaps even more so. It exists in the same space as your own, but they are separated by a veil. He makes a sweeping gesture, as if tracing the outline of this invisible barrier. It's not just a matter of it being invisible. The other side is composed of a different kind of matter, something fundamentally unlike anything you understand as matter. His hand moves in the air, and for a moment you think you see the faintest shimmer, like a ripple across the surface of a pond. Your world is embedded within this larger one. Like a nesting doll, it fits within it, surrounded and permeated by it. The metaphor lingers in your mind. You imagine your reality as a small, delicate thing, encased within something much larger, its existence contingent upon the integrity of the outer shell. The veil, he continues, isn't just an optical barrier. It's governed by forces, fundamental laws of nature that your world has yet to comprehend. His words sink in slowly, and you feel a chill spread through you, colder than any breeze could bring. If your world is nested within another, hidden only by an unseen veil, then everything you've ever known, everything you believe to be solid, permanent, could be nothing more than a fragile illusion, a thin layer of reality, suspended within an infinite, unfathomable expanse. As you absorb this, the old man's expression remains solemn, as if he knows the weight of the truth he's placing upon your shoulders. It's not that your senses are faulty, he adds. It's that your senses were never designed to perceive beyond the veil. The goggles, they give you a glimpse, but it's only that, a glimpse. The rest, well, the rest is a universe beyond your comprehension. The stranger's eyes seem to deepen, shadows gathering in their corners as he continues, his voice dropping to a murmur that makes the world around you feel smaller, as if he's speaking to you alone, in a space that no one else can penetrate. The veil, he says, is not as solid as you might think. It isn't a wall, it's more like a mist, a thin shroud that separates the two realms. It can be crossed, and it often is, though not in ways you would expect. He lets the words hang, as if waiting for you to understand the implications. In fact, he continues, crossing from the other world into yours is easy, easier than you'd like to believe. To those who dwell beyond, this barrier barely exists. It's a matter of perspective, a shift, a turn of thought. And suddenly, it's as if the veil was never there at all. A chill runs down your spine as you process his words. You imagine beings, things you cannot begin to comprehend, slipping through this veil like fish darting through water, their presence masked by the thin layer separating your existence from theirs. It's a disquieting thought, the idea that something could be so close, sharing the same space as you without your awareness, that all it would take for them to cross over is a shift, a change in perspective that your mind can't fathom. But what does that mean for us, you ask, your voice hushed, as if speaking too loudly might draw the attention of unseen ears? How can something so close remain hidden? The stranger's smile is thin, and there's no humor in it. You are not equipped to understand it, he says, the words blunt, but without malice. Your mind, your senses, they were never built for it. The nature of this duality, this entanglement between your world and the one beyond, is beyond the grasp of human perception. He pauses, watching your reaction, and you feel the weight of his gaze. Technological aids like the goggles can help, he explains, lifting the goggles slightly, as if to emphasize their role. They provide a glimpse, a small tear through which you can see a sliver of the truth. But that's all it is, a sliver. His expression darkens, and you sense the gravity of what he's saying. The goggles reveal the shape of things, but not their essence. They let you see the contours of the unseen, but not the why, the how, or the full implications. They won't give you the whole picture because your mind, your very biology, is not prepared for it. You feel the weight of this realization settle in, a leaden sensation that presses down on your chest. So, we're limited? You ask, a note of resignation creeping into your voice. We can only ever catch glimpses. The old man nods. Yes, you have limitations that cannot be overcome. To see beyond the veil and comprehend it fully, you would need to transcend the very nature of what it means to be human. His words resonate with a finality that leaves little room for hope, and that is not something you or anyone else can do, not yet. He says those last words with a softness, as if acknowledging the impossibility of the task. You feel the truth in his statement, a truth that makes your world feel smaller, more fragile, like a soap bubble hovering on the edge of a vast and unknowable sea. You stare at the stranger, the weight of the goggles still heavy in your hands. What are they? You ask, your voice barely a whisper, as if saying the words any louder might give them form and presence. Those things, what are they? The stranger's eyes meet yours, and for a moment there's a hesitation, a pause that feels like it stretches into an eternity. You can sense the reluctance in him, the way his gaze narrows as he considers his answer. It's as if he's weighing the truth, measuring it against some unseen scale. The silence between you grows thick, the air charged with a tension that feels almost electric. Finally, he exhales, a slow, measured breath that seems to carry the weight of years. It's not a simple question, he begins, his tone careful, almost cautious. If you want to know what they are, you must first understand what they do. What they are is inseparable from their function, their purpose. He leans closer, and you can feel the shift in the air around you, the way the world seems to pull inward, focusing on this moment, on his words. I can show you, he says, and there's a gravity in his voice that sends a shiver through your spine. But be warned, once you see, there's no turning back. The path you've started down, it doesn't end where you think it does. It may not end at all. The warning hangs in the air, and you feel the weight of it settle over you like a shroud. There is something in his eyes, an intensity, a darkness that wasn't there before, or perhaps you just hadn't noticed it. You know instinctively that what he is offering isn't a simple explanation. It's an invitation to cross a line that once crossed can never be uncrossed. An unseen price lies beneath his words, like the sharp edge of a knife hidden beneath a velvet cloth. And yet you also know that there is no real choice. You are already on this path. You've already seen the world behind the veil, even if just a fragment. Curiosity, that eternal gnawing force, grips you tighter than fear. The truth, whatever it may be, feels like a siren's call, pulling you further into the depths. You swallow, feeling the dryness in your throat, and nod. I want to see, you say, the words falling from your lips like stones. The sense of inevitability is there, as if you were always meant to speak them. The stranger's lips twitch into a shadow of a smile, but it's not a smile of comfort. There's something predatory in it, something ancient. Very well, he says, but remember, you chose this. You feel a strange sensation, as if the world itself is holding its breath. The light seems to dim, and the air grows heavier, pressing down on you. Somewhere, deep within, you sense the finality of the moment, the point of no return. Whatever you are about to witness, you know it will change you, just as surely as the goggles did. Prepare yourself, he whispers, and his voice seems to echo like a ripple moving outward through space. The truth waits. The stranger raises his hands, and you watch as they move in ways that should be impossible. His fingers twist, bending in on themselves, and for a moment, his hands appear to turn inside out, the bones and tendons rearranging like a grotesque puzzle. The movement is hypnotic, a blur of flesh that makes your eyes ache, as if your vision struggles to reconcile the image with reality. It's like watching a shadow that doesn't quite match the object casting it, an unsettling discord between perception and truth. Before you can react, the world shifts. There's no sensation of movement, no rush of air or sense of motion, just a sudden pull, as if the ground has been yanked out from beneath you. One moment you stand in the quiet of the forest glade, and the next, the scenery around you explodes into noise and color. You're no longer on that peaceful path. Instead, you're standing amidst a throng of people, the hum of the city all around you. The transition is so sudden, so jarring, that your stomach flips and a wave of nausea crashes over you. It feels as though you've taken a single step that somehow turned into 1,000 miles. The city is immense, a sprawling labyrinth of steel and glass, and you find yourself on the edge of a park, the green expanse framed by skyscrapers. The air is thick with the scent of exhaust, hot pavement, and the distant aroma of street food. Your senses are assaulted by the honking of cars, the chatter of voices, and the distant wail of a siren. People move past you, caught up in their own worlds, paying no attention to you or the stranger who stands beside you. You sway, feeling the disorientation tug at your sense of balance. Something feels wrong, not just the nausea, but a deeper disturbance, like your sense of space has been subtly twisted. It's as if your body knows you've been transported in a way that defies natural laws, and your inner ear protests, sending confused signals that only heighten your unease. The stranger remains calm, watching the crowd with the detached interest of someone surveying an aquarium. "Don't worry," he says, his voice a low murmur beneath the city's noise. "It's normal to feel that way at first." You blink, trying to ground yourself, to make sense of how you've gone from the quiet of a forest to the chaos of the city without any time passing. "How?" you begin, but the stranger cuts you off, gesturing with a flick of his wrist. "It's not as strange as you might think," he says, his eyes never leaving the crowd. "When you travel, you have to choose your entry point carefully. We've appeared in a place where our presence won't create records, no memories, no impressions left behind, and certainly no technological traces." He turns to you, his expression as serious as you've ever seen it. These are spaces where the flow of space-time hasn't collapsed, where the possibilities of the wave function remain undefined. His words swirl in your mind, confusing and yet filled with a sense of hidden logic. "Wave function?" you echo, grasping at the term like a lifeline in a sea of confusion. He nods. "Think of it as a doorway, a place in the fabric of reality that remains malleable. These places, these gaps in the record, they appear and disappear like foam bubbles or holes in an ever-morphing sponge, fleeting, ever-shifting. They are the only places you can move through without causing disruption in what was and will become." His explanation sends a shiver through you. You look around at the people in the park, at the way they move as if you don't exist, and a chill settles in your bones. The thought that there are gaps in the world where you can appear and vanish without leaving a trace makes reality feel like a thin veneer, barely holding its shape. It's as if the world you know is nothing more than a series of interconnected rooms, and he's shown you a hidden passage between them, one that slips in and out of existence at its own whim. You want to ask more, to press him on how this works, but the nausea still lingers, and the dizzying realization of your newfound understanding leaves you feeling small, like a child caught in a game where the rules have suddenly changed. The explanation hovers just out of reach, like a fragment of a dream you can almost remember. It feels like trying to grasp smoke, but the logic behind his words is undeniable. Despite the disorientation that clings to you, there is a sense, however small, that what he says aligns with the reality around you. No one has noticed your sudden appearance. The crowd moves with the indifference of those who see nothing unusual, no ripple in the fabric of their day-to-day lives. If you had truly materialized out of thin air, someone would have reacted. Someone would have noticed. You accept his words, even if they only add to the confusion bubbling in your mind. The truth feels distant, just beyond your fingertips, but you can feel it lurking there, hidden in the spaces between the stranger's words. Why here, you ask, your voice sounding small against the backdrop of the bustling city. The noise, the motion, the energy of the place all press in on you, but the old man remains a fixed point of calm. He smiles, a gesture that is neither warm nor cold, just a quiet acknowledgement. If you want to understand, you'll need to see for yourself. The goggles will show you. You glance down at the goggles in your hands, the leather straps and hexagonal dome lenses suddenly feeling heavier. The memory of what you saw the last time you put them on is still vivid, a dark spectre that lingers at the edges of your mind. You know deep down that putting them on again will plunge you back into that world, into the unknown horrors lurking beyond the veil. Doubt creeps in, and for a moment you hesitate. The city feels alive around you, its energy so real, so tangible. You could let it all go, walk away, leave this mystery to remain unsolved, and slip back into the comforting embrace of the ordinary. But curiosity is a powerful thing, and you know you've already gone too far. The stranger's presence, the things you've seen, they have ignited a fire that will not be easily extinguished. You take a deep breath, the air heavy with the mingled scents of city life, car exhaust, distant food carts, the faint musk of trees from the park. You close your eyes, bracing yourself as you slip the goggles over your head, the straps pulling tight. The frame rests against your skin, cool and unyielding, and for a heartbeat, there is only darkness. The world outside is muted, the sounds of the city muffled as if heard through a thick fog. You feel your pulse quicken, the anticipation clawing at your insides. With one final breath, you force your eyes open. The world reappears through the lenses, but it is not the same city you saw before. The streets are still filled with people, the park's greenery still stretches out before you, and the buildings still loom overhead like steel giants. But everything is transformed, as if a new layer of reality has been peeled back, revealing the truth beneath. The people around you still move through their routines, but there's a shimmering quality to them now, an added depth that wasn't there before. They carry with them a kind of glow, a light that pulses and dances around their bodies. It's mesmerizing, like watching sunlight ripple across water. Some glows are soft and faint, a delicate aura that barely outlines the contours of their form. Others burn bright and fierce, intense hues that cast radiant halos around their silhouettes. You feel a strange sense of awe as you take in the spectacle. Some glows swirl with blues and greens, others blaze with fiery reds and oranges. A few even display the full spectrum, colors blending and merging like liquid rainbows. It's beautiful, but there's an unnatural quality to it, something that makes the hair on your arms stand up. You realize that these glows aren't just aesthetic. They pulse in time with the person's movement, like a heartbeat made visible, responding to their emotions and actions. A man jogging past you has a vibrant, energetic aura, crackling with electric blue streaks, while an elderly woman resting on a bench emits a soft, amber warmth that flickers gently, like the dying embers of a fire. But then, as you scan the crowd, you begin to notice something strange. Not everyone has this aura. Roughly half the people you see lack the glow entirely. At first they look normal, no different from the others, and you think perhaps the goggles have simply malfunctioned. But as you focus, the truth begins to crystallize. The people without the vibrant auras aren't entirely like the others. Their skin, under the pink-tinted filter of the goggles, has a faint, silvery sheen, like the tree you saw earlier. It's subtle, barely there, like the ghost of a reflection on still water. The glow is not the vibrant living color that the others possess. It's pale and cold, like moonlight reflected off metal. It clings to them, a thin layer that follows their movements but does not pulse or shift. It's as if they are wrapped in a shell that imitates the living glow but lacks the warmth, the vibrancy that marks the others. You feel a chill as you study them. They move through the crowd, their faces just as expressive, their bodies just as animated. But now that you've seen it, you can't unsee the difference. Their eyes, though bright, seem to lack the depth, the spark of the others. It's like looking at a photograph of a person instead of the person themselves. Real enough on the surface but missing something vital, something that you can't quite put into words. The more you look, the more the silvery glow unnerves you. You feel a prickle of unease as you watch them move among the others, their presence oddly discordant. It's like seeing an echo of life, a facsimile that somehow fails to capture the essence of the original. The ones with the vibrant glows are alive, their auras radiating warmth and energy, but these others, they are cold, hollow. Your gaze darts between the two types, and a creeping thought begins to form. If the auras reflect something of the life force, the spirit of those who possess them, then what are these other people? What do they lack? The city, for all its noise and life, suddenly feels like a stage, and the people walking past are actors whose roles you cannot fully understand. You realize with a sinking feeling that you are seeing something fundamental about this world, something hidden beneath the surface all along. The unsettling sight of those with silvery skin and the vibrant living auras mingling together leaves a lingering sense of disquiet. But you force yourself to look past it. There is too much happening, too much to understand all at once, and you know that clinging to one mystery will only blind you to others. You breathe deeply, focusing on your surroundings, letting the city's movement draw your attention outward. The street is a tapestry of motion and light, and the park's trees sway gently, their leaves whispering in the breeze. And then you see them. They hover at the edge of your vision, like smudges on the lens, refusing to come into clear focus. At first, you think they are just shadows, tricks of the light playing off the buildings or drifting clouds above. But as you shift your gaze, you catch glimpses of them moving, no longer smudges, but shapes. Shapes that change constantly, as if each is made of shifting smoke, rippling and morphing into 100 forms at once. They stand and move in the air, and some hover just above the ground, their bodies caught between presence and absence. Your eyes strain, trying to fix on one of them, but the harder you look, the less sense they make. They have no fixed shape, and yet seem to possess all shapes at once. A maddening array of forms that twist and fold in on themselves. A flicker of wings here, a flash of claws there, and then a face, human but not quite, melting back into something reptilian, insectile or worse. It's like watching an artist sketch in mid-air, never deciding on the final image. The beings are everywhere, scattered among the people, some high above, drifting lazily through the air, others crouched low, their forms interspersed between the roots of trees and the gaps between paving stones. They don't follow the rules of space. One moment they are far away, the next they seem to blink into existence near you before dissolving again into the periphery of your vision. They are both there and not there, like the fluttering of a moth's wings caught in the corner of your eye, something you feel more than see. You start to notice a pattern. These beings are not just moving aimlessly, They hover close to people, observing their shifting forms, leaning in, almost curious. You catch sight of one standing behind a man sitting on a bench. It reaches out, its shape flickering between what looks like a long, skeletal hand and a mass of writhing tendrils. You can't quite make out what it's doing, whether it's touching the man, hovering over him, or doing something else entirely, but you feel an inexplicable chill as you watch. The man seems oblivious, continuing to read his newspaper, the vibrant aura around him rippling with calm blues and greens. Another being hovers near a woman, strolling along the path, her aura a brilliant yellow, bright and joyous. The creature shifts shape repeatedly, its form resembling a serpentine creature for a moment. Before it becomes a swarm of tiny, buzzing motes, it extends part of itself toward her, a faint spectral limb that brushes the edges of her glow. You try to make sense of what you're seeing, but the interaction is too subtle, too shrouded by the ambiguity of the goggles. It's as if the lenses reveal the presence of the beings, but not their intent. Your gaze drifts from person to person, and it becomes clear that these beings are all around you. Some are attached closely, their shifting forms intertwining with the bodies of those with bright auras, while others linger at a distance, watching, waiting. You feel their gaze settle on you for brief moments, like icy pinpricks running down your spine, before they move on, uninterested. It's as if they are cataloguing the emotions and energy of the people around them, evaluating, searching for something. The air feels colder now, and the park, once a place of bustling life, becomes a shadowed stage, populated by figures only you can see. The feeling of being caught between two realities intensifies, the knowledge that these beings, these things, have been here all along, moving unseen among people, altering and observing. The thought settles heavily in your chest. How long have they been watching? And why? You shift your focus to a couple sitting on a bench beneath the shade of a large tree, their figures framed by the soft, dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. They appear to be in their 30s, their expressions relaxed as they share a quiet moment. The man's aura is a vibrant, swirling palette of colors, brilliant reds, warm yellows, and hints of cool blue that ripple and mix, responding to his every gesture and laugh. The woman beside him, however, is different. Her skin has that same silvery sheen, the faint moonlight glow that marks her as one of the others. It's a subtle luminescence, cool and distant, lacking the warmth and vibrancy of the man's aura. They speak, their conversation soft and intimate, but the reality behind their moment of connection begins to twist as your eyes catch sight of the being standing just behind them. It hovers, shifting between shapes, sometimes a slender, shadow-like figure, other times a mass of writhing tendrils. It seems almost patient, as if waiting for the perfect moment. Then, as the man leans closer to the woman, its form stabilizes, and something extends from it, a thin, spectral appendage that ripples with a dark energy. You watch, heart pounding, as the extension moves toward the man's head and chest. It is slow, deliberate, like the tendrils of a deep-sea creature reaching out to touch its prey. When it makes contact, it slips into him with a sickening ease, as if phasing through his skin, breaching the boundary between their bodies and connecting them in some unseen way. The man doesn't react. His eyes remain fixed on the woman's, his expression unchanged, even as the being's tendrils burrow deeper, intertwining with the glow of his aura. As the tendrils sink in, the man's aura begins to change. The colors, once vibrant and full of life, fade and darken. The reds dull, the blues lose their depth, and the entire aura begins to shrink, as if the light and energy are being siphoned away. The being behind him pulses, its form brightening, and for a moment you swear you can see its shape solidify, a glimpse of something insectile, with too many eyes, each one glimmering with a hungry light. It absorbs the energy, and you can almost feel the satisfaction radiating from it, like the contentment of a predator feeding after a long hunt. The couple continues their conversation, oblivious to the invisible theft taking place. The man's voice remains light, his eyes warm, but the brightness around him fades, his aura now a pale echo of its former self. The woman with the silvery skin looks back at him, smiling, unaware that the being behind them has already taken what it wanted. As the tendrils retract, slipping back into the shifting form, the man's energy dims further, like a candle guttering out in a wind. You watch, frozen as the creature withdraws. It lingers for a moment, almost as if savoring the residual energy, and then shifts its focus elsewhere. It moves on, gliding through the park, scanning the crowd for its next target. The man continues talking, unaware of the change, his aura now a faint shadow of its former vibrancy. The woman's silvery skin glows faintly, unchanging, and she seems entirely unaffected by the creature's actions. You can't shake the feeling that she has no idea of what's happening, or perhaps she cannot feel it at all. The scene leaves a heavy weight in your chest. You realize that these beings are not passive observers. They are active participants, taking from those with vibrant auras while the world remains blind to their presence. They move in silence, draining energy like parasites, feeding off the life force of those unaware of the danger they're in. The being's movements are fluid, almost predatory, as it glides away from the couple on the bench. You track its progress, your gaze locked onto its shifting form as it weaves through the crowd, unnoticed by anyone but you. It moves with an eerie grace, folding in on itself and expanding again, like a shadow cast by a flickering light. It pauses, its amorphous body undulating, scanning the sea of people until its attention fixes on another target. An older woman walks slowly along the path, her steps careful, her face lined with years of experience and gentle worry. Her aura, though not as vivid as the man's, still shimmers with soft hues of gold and pale blue, colors that speak of wisdom and resilience. She carries an air of quiet dignity, and her glow, though muted, is steady and calm. The being hesitates for just a moment, as if assessing the value of its new target. Then, with a speed that defies comprehension, it darts toward her. Its form ripples, narrowing into a spear-like extension that shoots forward, closing the distance in the blink of an eye. The movement is so swift, so precise, that you almost miss it. You feel a shiver run down your spine as you watch the extension connect with her, piercing her aura like a needle puncturing the surface of water. The tendril sinks into her, and for a brief second her aura flares, brightening, reacting as if to push the invader away. But the resistance is short-lived. The glow dims as the being draws something from her, siphoning off the energy like a thief draining the light from a lamp. The change is subtle, but unmistakable. The soft gold fades to a dull, muted brown, the blue to a greyish hue. Her steps falter, just for a heartbeat, as if an invisible weight presses down on her shoulders. It isn't as much as what was taken from the man. Her aura remains intact, though diminished. The being retracts its tendril quickly, folding it back into the shifting mass of its form. It lingers for a moment, hovering just behind her, as if contemplating whether to take more. But after a moment's hesitation, it pulls away, its shape twisting and reforming as it glides to the next person passing by. You exhale, only then realizing you'd been holding your breath, and watch the older woman as she resumes her slow walk. Her eyes are distant, her expression thoughtful, but you sense that she has felt nothing. No pain, no disruption. It's as if the encounter had left no mark on her consciousness, but her aura tells a different story. It is noticeably weaker now, the once vibrant colors dulled, as if a piece of her life force had been quietly siphoned away. The being moves on, satisfied with what it took, and you can't help but feel a chill. You wonder how often this happens, how many times these creatures move among people, taking pieces of their essence without them ever realizing. You watch as the entity drifts through the crowd, seeking its next target, and you realize that this is not a random act. There is a purpose behind its actions, a calculated intent to gather and consume, piece by piece. The woman continues down the path, her aura now a pale echo of what it was. She is none the wiser, but you know that something has been taken from her, something she may never notice, but that she will feel deep down as a subtle fatigue or a sense of emptiness. You feel helpless watching this silent theft unfold. The knowledge that these beings are harvesting life, siphoning the energy of people all around you, leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. And the worst part is knowing that this is only a small part of a much larger pattern, one that has been unfolding quietly in the shadows for who knows how long. Your gaze darts back to the stranger, the weight of confusion heavy in your chest. "What are they doing?" you ask, the words coming out harsher than you intended. There's a tightness in your voice, a desperation to make sense of the silent horror unfolding before you. The stranger's face is impassive, but there's a flicker of something in his eyes, something that hints at the depth of the truth he knows but has not yet revealed. "They harvest," he says, his voice as calm as ever, the words simple and final. "They harvest." The phrase hangs in the air, and the simplicity of it makes your skin prickle. They harvest. Slowly, like the pieces of a puzzle beginning to fit, you start to understand. The creatures, these beings that shift and move between the people, they are predators, taking something vital, something unseen, from those around them. But why? And how? The mechanics of it, the purpose behind their actions, still slip through your grasp like shadows in the dark. Before you can press him for more answers, the stranger points across the street. "Watch." You follow his finger, your eyes locking onto a young man walking briskly, his attention fixed on his phone. He steps off the curb, oblivious to the traffic, and for a moment, everything slows. A car screeches to a halt, missing him by inches. The shock hits him like a physical blow, and his aura erupts in a blaze of color, vibrant reds and oranges streaked with sharp bursts of yellow. It's as if the fear, the adrenaline coursing through his veins, is made visible, radiating from him like flames. And then, as if summoned by the sudden flare of energy, one of the beings materializes out of the air. It moves with a speed that defies logic, a blur of dark tendrils that converge on the young man's aura. The extensions latch onto the vibrant colors, sinking into the glowing mass like roots burrowing into fertile soil. The creature convulses, its form spasming in ecstatic jerks as it drinks in the energy. You can almost feel its delight, a twisted satisfaction that radiates from its shifting, writhing body. The young man, still reeling from his near-death experience, is unaware of the creature attached to him. His breathing is heavy, his eyes wide with shock as he clutches his chest. The aura around him flickers and fades, the once brilliant colors dimming as the creature feeds. You watch, horrified, as the vibrant reds and oranges drain into pale shades, the brightness sucked away until only a faint glow remains. The being's shape pulses, expanding and contracting with each intake, as if savoring every drop of the young man's fear. The moment the young man steps safely onto the other side of the street, the creature withdraws. It vanishes in a blink, dissolving into the air, as if it was never there. The young man stumbles, leaning against a lamppost, his face pale and drawn. His hand trembles as he runs it through his hair, still visibly distressed, and he takes a moment to collect himself before walking on, his aura now a weak, barely there shimmer. The stranger's words echo in your mind. They harvest. You see it now, the pattern behind their actions. They don't just feed randomly, they seek out moments of heightened emotion, of intense energy, fear, shock, pain. These are the things that draw them in, like sharks scenting blood in the water. They latch onto these emotional spikes, devouring the energy as if it is their lifeblood. As you watch the young man continue down the street, his shoulders hunched and his steps slower, a chilling thought forms. How many people experience these small, unexplainable moments of exhaustion, the sudden drain of energy, without ever realizing they've been preyed upon? You glance around, and the city feels different now. It's no longer a place of bustling life, but a hunting ground, a stage where unseen predators move among their unsuspecting prey. The stranger turns to you, and there's no hint of satisfaction in his eyes, only a grim understanding. "This is their world too," he says quietly. Another couple strolls past, and immediately you sense the familiar pattern. The woman glows with an aura, a soft luminescence of shifting blues and purples, while the man walks alongside her, his skin reflecting that same unsettling moonlit silver. The air seems to pulse around them, and two entities, their forms amorphous and twitching like liquid, caught between moments, accompany them, just out of phase with the visible world. One of the entities extends an appendage, if such a shape can be called that, toward the man. The silvery sheen of his skin ripples as if reacting to some unseen force. His eyes darken, and his expression shifts into something predatory. With a sudden movement he reaches for the woman, his gestures transforming from affectionate to aggressively possessive. His touch, once tentative, becomes rough, as if driven by a force beyond his control. The woman recoils, her aura flaring in response. It flickers violently, oscillating through shades of red and green as her emotions shift from confusion to fear. The second entity moves swiftly, extending its tendrils into the flickering light surrounding her. You watch as the tendrils pull at her aura, the colors dimming as something intangible, yet vital, is siphoned away. It's as if the being is feeding, the essence of her emotions drawn out in delicate strands of light. There's a moment where her eyes meet yours, wide, terrified, and pleading, before the glow around her fades, and she sags, resigned. The entities retract their tendrils, the air around them still for a brief instant, before they glide away, their forms merging into the ambient shadows of the street. You watch closely, a sickening understanding dawning on you. It becomes clear that the beings never interact with those bearing the silvery skin. These people seem to act as conduits, manipulated rather than harvested. It's only the ones with auras that the entities seek out, their glowing halos of energy serving as beacons for these cosmic parasites. You notice the pattern. One being uses the man like a marionette, provoking his aggressive behavior to elicit a response from the woman. Her fear and the surge of energy it generates in her aura becomes the target for the other entity to consume. Turning to the stranger, you explain your theory, how it appears the creature manipulated the man's behavior to affect the woman's aura, allowing the other to feed. The stranger listens, nodding slightly as if you're beginning to grasp some rudimentary truth, but his expression remains guarded, like a teacher who knows the lesson is far from over. "What are they taking?" you ask, a desperate edge to your voice. "Why only the people with auras? Is it some kind of spiritual energy extraction?" The stranger's eyes narrow and he lets out a sigh, the kind that suggests you've missed the point entirely. "You don't understand," he begins, his tone patient but edged with a distant sadness. "What you're seeing as an aura, what you think is spiritual or ethereal, is just another manifestation of the world beyond the veil. It's the same substance, the same fabric that composes everything over there." He gestures vaguely, as if indicating an unseen realm layered just out of sight. It's connected to you, to your physical form, through forces that are beyond your understanding, and it's not what they want. What you see is just a side effect of something entirely different. You try to process this, feeling the weight of the explanation settle over you like a fog. The aura, then, is just a reflection, a mirage of something deeper, something you can barely perceive through the pink haze of the goggles. But if they're not taking the aura, then what are they after? He points to your chest, his finger hovering just over your heart. Your body, he says, is a chemical marvel. It's capable of producing countless molecules, hormones, neurotransmitters, compounds that shape every feeling, every thought you have. That's what they're here for. His voice becomes a whisper, as if divulging a forbidden truth. The emotions you experience, the highs and the lows, they create different blends of these chemicals, and some of these, when amplified by intense emotions, fear, desire, pain, are delicious. His eyes flash, and you feel a shiver run down your spine as he continues. These beings, when they pierce you with those tendrils, when they feed, it's not the aura they're after, but the very essence of your feelings. They're addicted to the chemical cocktails you produce. His lips curl into a thin smile. Think of it like a connoisseur savoring a fine wine. You swallow, your mouth dry, the weight of his words making the world around you seem suddenly more sinister. You're not just a witness to some cosmic phenomenon. You're the main course in a feast far more terrifying than anything you could have imagined. The stranger's eyes hold a cold gleam as he elaborates, his words slow and deliberate, as if savoring the truth he is about to share. Fear, pain, and terror, he says. They are the most potent. They create the strongest, most complex mixtures. It's those moments when your heart races, when your body floods with adrenaline, when your mind teeters on the edge of panic, that produce the most exquisite flavors for them. A chill runs through you as he continues, but it's not just fear they crave. Lust, longing, addiction, any intense emotion can be just as enticing. Bliss, satisfaction, even the sweet relief of hope. They all create different delectable states. The stronger your response, the more complex the chemical blend. Imagine an artist's palette, where each stroke is a different shade. These beings are the critics, the connoisseurs, and every color, every flavor is something they savor. You feel a knot tightening in your stomach as you ask the question gnawing at your mind. But why us? Why not animals or something else? Why humans? The stranger's expression doesn't shift, remaining calm, almost detached, as if discussing something as mundane as the weather. Because you were designed for it. You were cultivated, refined over millennia. The animals you know are simple, crude instruments in comparison. Humans, however, were molded to be the perfect food source. You produce precisely what they need. His eyes lock onto yours, and you sense a gravity in his stare, a weight that you can't shake off. You are a designer breed, he states, voice almost clinical, and they are your owners. Just as you keep livestock, breeding them to be tender and compliant, they keep you. It's not just nature. It's a contract. One they've been enforcing for longer than you can imagine. You feel the words settle over you, a suffocating truth that makes the air feel heavy and thin at once. Every step you've taken, every breath you've drawn, suddenly feels like it was for someone else's amusement, someone else's sustenance. The stranger's tone takes on an unsettling enthusiasm, as if he's revealing a secret gourmet menu. Animals and plants, he scoffs lightly. They're nothing. You, however, are the Kobe steak of the cosmic buffet, a delicacy they've perfected. Your body, your mind, they yield the richest, most intricate flavors. He pauses, and the intensity of his gaze bores into you. But don't think that makes you special in a way that benefits you. It's simply about the yield. You produce the richest blend of emotions, the most potent chemical ecstasies, so they favor you above all else. And while they may occasionally indulge in other life forms, you, humans, are their prime delicacy. The air around you feels colder as he continues. And when they want more than just a taste, when they crave a true feast, they take one or even many of you whole. Flesh, blood, organs, everything. The body becomes a chemical reactor, producing an intense cascade of neurotransmitters and hormones. Fear, pain, the final surge of life, these combine into a heady brew that drives them into a frenzy. It's not unlike a drug-fueled orgy, but the drug is you. The image he paints fills your mind with a visceral horror, as if you can almost hear the wet sound of flesh being torn and the silent scream of nerves firing in a final, futile protest. You swallow, your throat dry as the realization settles deeper. This isn't just consumption, it's a ritual of indulgence, a carnival of suffering. And you are both the performer and the feast. The stranger's words swirl in your head, clashing and tumbling against one another. It's as if your mind rejects them, refusing to let them solidify into anything comprehensible. You've heard him, every word clear and distinct, but the grotesque implications slip away, refusing to take root. The more he explains, the more your thoughts scatter like leaves in a storm, even with the evidence burning fresh behind your eyes. The truth he offers feels like an impossibility, too vast, too cruel. Desperately, you try to anchor yourself in a familiar reality, something simple, something comforting. But we are the dominant species on this planet, you insist, as if clinging to a mantra. We're the apex predator. There's nothing above us. The stranger's eyes remain steady, his expression calm, like a parent indulging a child's naivete. Who? He says, the question rolling off his tongue with an almost mocking gentleness. Said the food chain has to end with you on top. His words hang in the air, and you feel the floor of your understanding shift beneath you. A sudden vertigo, as if you're falling through a space where the rules you've always known no longer apply. The confidence you clung to shatters, and a new kind of dread begins to take its place. A cold, creeping realization that the stories you've told yourself about power and dominion might have always been lies. No, that can't be true. The words spill from your mouth, and they sound almost desperate, even to your own ears. Surely the government knows about this, right? They must have plans, something to protect us. The stranger's lips curl into a small, knowing smile. Oh, they know, he replies, a hint of bitter amusement coloring his tone. They've known pieces of it for quite some time, but it's a knowledge only a select few hold, those who sit behind the veil of secrecy themselves. He pauses, his eyes locking onto yours with a steady, unnerving intensity. And tell me, what do you think they can do? His question hangs between you, cold and sharp. They're human too, just like you, he continues, no more powerful, despite all their resources and secrets. They may have access to information beyond your wildest imaginings, but that knowledge is a burden, not a weapon. He gestures vaguely, as if pointing to some distant, invisible experiment. Some have tried. Oh yes, they've conducted their experiments, made their attempts to pierce the veil or strike bargains, hoping to escape their place on the food chain. But tell me, his smile fades, his eyes darkening. Can a cow escape its pasture? The analogy sits uncomfortably in your mind. You try to push it away, but it lingers, spreading like a chill through your bones. You see it clearly, livestock penned in, blissfully unaware of the vast world beyond their fenced enclosures. Even if one were to leap the barrier, what then? The world outside is not made for them. They wouldn't last long. In that moment you realize that knowledge alone is no shield. Some people within the government may know the truth, but knowledge without power is as futile as a locked gate to a caged beast. Even if a cow manages to jump the fence, the stranger continues, his voice a soft murmur like the wind threading through a field. What then? Out there, beyond the boundary, it's not a paradise. It's a death trap. It would likely stumble onto a road where the machinery of the outside world would tear it apart in an instant. He pauses, his gaze drifting as if he can see the tragic scene play out. Maybe it would be struck by a speeding car, the metal beast reducing it to little more than a bloody stain. Perhaps it would wander onto a highway where the sheer force of a truck would make quick work of it. Or if it strayed into civilization, someone, a hunter, the police, would put it down, perceiving it as a threat or nuisance. He meets your eyes again, and the light there is cold, detached. Either way, there's nothing out there for the cow. It isn't equipped to survive outside the fence. Its destiny remains as fixed as the bars of its pen, no matter how far it runs. The realization settles heavily in your chest as he presses on. It's no different for you or your government. They too have attempted to leap the fence, to go beyond their bounds, and they have learned the futility of it all. Those who dared to explore found only dead ends, the world outside far more hostile than they imagined. He sighs, a sound that carries the weight of countless failed attempts and false hopes. All they can do is hold their position, play their role, and try to clean up the mess whenever one of your owners grows too greedy. They distract the rest of you with stories, cover up the feasts when they spill over. But in the end, it's all just damage control. You feel the futility of it gnawing at you. The fence isn't just physical. It's a boundary of understanding, of power. You were never meant to cross it. There's a tragic irony to all of this, the stranger says, his voice dropping to a hushed tone, as if revealing a forbidden secret. Your government, for all its impotence, holds the power to end everything, the power to destroy the pasture entirely with their most precious toys, nuclear weapons. He tilts his head slightly, the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. But cattle are valuable. Your owners wouldn't want their prize stock obliterated. The words hang heavy in the air, the implications settling like a cold weight in your chest. So, they have methods, carrot and stick. He makes a gesture as if tossing something onto the ground. They've thrown a few bones your way, scraps of technology from the other side, just enough to keep your scientists busy, poking and prodding, convinced they're on the verge of understanding something grand. He laughs softly, but there's no warmth in it. They know your kind can't fathom it. They've been playing this game for far longer than your species has existed. The records are there, buried deep. Accounts of experiments gone disastrously wrong. But your kind is so easily misled, so eager to believe in its own supremacy, that these incidents are quickly swept under the rug. It doesn't take much for those in power to cover up a few mishaps. His eyes darken, the shadows within them deepening as he speaks. Every now and then, your owners like to remind your government of their place. A bit of interference here, a disruption in your primitive defense systems there. It's their way of upholding the agreement, ensuring your leaders remember the terms of the contract. Most notably, that when to use nukes is not up to them to decide. Well, at least not yet. You feel a shiver, a sense of helplessness creeping in. All those tales of advanced technology and hidden knowledge, they're not signs of human progress. They're leashes, carefully disguised to keep you tethered, and the hands that hold them are far beyond your reach. It's a humiliation, beyond your comprehension, the stranger continues, his voice tinged with a mix of pity and disdain. Imagine the individuals in your government, those who wield influence over millions, who see themselves as mighty shadowy figures towering over you, those who see themselves as the architects of fate. Now picture them confronted with their utter powerlessness, knowing that all their authority amounts to nothing when faced with your true owners. He pauses, letting the words sink in. Some know the truth, he says, but they are as shackled as the rest of you. Their lives hang on the same precarious thread as yours, subject to the whims and appetites of forces they cannot hope to control. They cling to the scraps of technology they've scavenged, desperate, like children clutching at shiny toys, convinced that someday they might understand how it all works. Those who know guard the artifacts so jealously they never would give them away for others to study. Just out of sheer greed and fear, someone else would unearth the power they want for themselves. A bitter chuckle escapes him. They still believe that knowledge will somehow grant them equality, that mastering these alien relics will elevate them beyond their status as livestock, grant them revenge. He shakes his head, the movement slow, almost sorrowful. How foolish they are. The air around you feels heavy, the weight of inevitability pressing down like an unseen hand. All they can do, he continues, is play their assigned roles, maintain the illusion of power, and assist in ensuring the success of the final breeding stage. They keep the rest of you in line, nurturing the system that sustains you while your owners prepare for the next phase. The words leave you with a sinking feeling, as if the ground beneath your feet is eroding, leaving you standing on the edge of a void. The game is rigged, and the players, no matter how powerful they seem, are mere pieces on a board controlled by forces beyond their reach. The stranger's words spiral through your mind, each revelation a gust that fans the flames of doubt and terror. Is this what aliens really are, you ask, your voice sounding small, as if the enormity of the question itself is too much to bear? And if that's true, then what about ghosts, demons, all the things people whisper about in the dark? He regards you with an expression that feels almost like pity, the weight of his knowledge reflected in his eyes. I already told you, he begins, his tone measured. The veil isn't impenetrable. It never was. The implications settle like stones in your gut as he continues. The other side is vast, infinitely larger, infinitely more complex than anything your species can comprehend. Sometimes it seeps into your world, leaking through the cracks like water through a sieve, and sometimes those on the other side cross over intentionally. His lips twitch into a smirk, but it lacks humor. There are juveniles, those who visit your world for amusement, playing pranks on your kind out of boredom. Others come for different reasons. An experiment, perhaps, or to try a new recipe. Sometimes it's to introduce a new gene into your pool, to see how it fares. His gaze sharpens. Updates, as you might call them. You shiver thinking of all the unexplained stories, the bizarre encounters people have had throughout history. How much of it was just that, children playing, scientists tinkering, or something else entirely? And every now and then, he continues, pets slip through the cracks. He says it so casually that you almost miss the gravity of it. Sometimes natural forces cause objects or signals from the other side to bleed into your reality. Lights in the sky, strange readings on your instruments, or as you've experienced with those goggles, a glimpse beyond the veil through technological means. The world feels suddenly more alive, every shadow, every shift in the wind, laden with hidden intent. Our realities are intertwined, he says, his voice echoing as if from some distant, unfathomable place. Events from your world affect theirs, and theirs shape yours. The veil is just that, a thin boundary, and sometimes it trembles. The realization grips you, leaving you feeling small in a universe you barely understand, where the truth is more layered and tangled than anything you could have imagined. The stranger's words linger at the edges of your awareness, the magnitude of his revelations numbing your thoughts. Confusion settles in like a fog, making it hard to focus. But there's one question, burning bright amidst the haze that you manage to force out. What are those auras? Are they our souls? Your hands fumble with the goggles, pulling them away as you try to make sense of the pink, transparent material. Its contours catch the light, shimmering faintly, as if holding secrets of their own. You trace the edges, trying to distract yourself from the gnawing terror inside, but the question remains, hanging in the air between you and the stranger. He watches you for a moment, then nods, as if acknowledging the seriousness of your inquiry. You could call it a soul, he admits, but it's not what you humans think a soul is. His voice is calm, almost clinical, like a doctor explaining a condition to a patient. Souls, as you imagine them, eternal spiritual entities, don't exist. The words sting, but you find yourself hanging on every one of them. The aura, or the light you see, is a reflection, a projection of matter from behind the veil tethered to your physical form. It's not eternal, it's not divine. It's something you accumulate over time through cause and effect, like dust collecting on a statically charged surface or matter falling into a gravity well. He pauses, letting the weight of this revelation sink in. As I said, the aura is a reflection of your essence, the part of you that touches the world beyond, but not the essence itself. See it as some kind of electric arc light sparking between two poles. You stare at the material, its pink hue now seeming less vibrant, more fragile. But this essence, the matter you accumulate, is not without purpose, he continues. It provides your consciousness a foothold, another vehicle, if you will. It's like a body that grows on the other side alongside your physical one. When your physical form dies here, if you've gathered enough mass, enough of the matter from beyond the veil, your consciousness can shift into that body. It's a strange comfort, but one wrapped in uncertainty. The idea of a second existence, a continuation beyond death, feels both promising and deeply unsettling, especially knowing the price that must be paid for it. You realize that the knowledge about the aura, as well as the essence behind, it isn't a gift. It's another layer of the puzzle, a connection to the world you've only begun to see. The stranger's explanation continues. If you manage to shift your consciousness into that other body, you continue to live, but not in the way you know. Time over there doesn't flow the same as it does here. It's fluid, not a straight line either, unfixed. A moment can stretch into an eternity, or an age can pass in the blink of an eye. It's just a matter of perspective. Yesterday, tomorrow. Now it's what you see, not when you are. He gestures absently, as if tracing the shape of something just beyond your perception. And sometimes those who were meant to cross over become bound to certain places or substances in this world instead. They don't fully detach, and their presence remain, lingering as faint echoes of what they once were. The idea chills you, a life that transcends death but remains tethered, unable to move on. These poor souls, if that's what you want to call them, don't last forever. They need sustenance, just like any living thing. But even their bodies, formed from the strange matter beyond the veil, aren't eternal. They age, they decay, but differently than you do. The law that governs everything still applies. Nothing lasts forever. His eyes darken as he speaks, as if recalling something ancient and sorrowful. Some become trapped, caught in loops, replaying the same moments again and again until they slowly fade into nothingness. Others... He hesitates, a shadow passing across his face. Others become desperate. They begin to consume, just as your owners consume you. Their existence is one of hunger, driven by the need to survive, even if it means feeding on whatever they can find. The thought of these beings, these echoes of human lives, roaming in search of sustenance, sends a shiver down your spine. It's a grim existence, a haunting parallel to the one you already knew, where survival is just another form of consumption. Of course, The stranger continues, his tone growing more somber. Not everyone is capable of acquiring enough mass from beyond the veil. Even those who manage to accumulate some of it may not gather enough to complete the transition when their physical body dies. He sighs, the weight of centuries of knowledge etched into his expression. Some find themselves stranded, halfway between worlds, with only fragments of a form. He shifts his gaze, eyes narrowing. And then there are those who acquire no mass at all. These humans, those with the silver skin, are different. They're merely material projections, like hollow shells animated to move through this world. His voice takes on a clinical edge. Think of them as automatons. They have no connection to the other side, no tether for their consciousness to transfer across when the time comes. In fact, they have no human consciousness at all. Their essence lingers closer to the animal kingdom than to anything else. The implications of this sink in, and a chill runs down your spine. But they serve a purpose, he adds. These projections can be used. Your owners and other entities beyond the veil utilize them as portals, vessels through which they can interact directly with your world. They may lack the light you call a soul, but that makes them all the more pliable. He pauses, his gaze turning cold. They aren't harvested, though. They aren't suitable or tasty enough. They lack the connection to the other side that makes your kind desirable. His words carry a faint trace of disgust. But if hunger grows desperate enough, they are still used, repurposed for other needs. The thought of these empty vessels being inhabited, used as tools by entities beyond your understanding, fills you with quiet, unsettling horror. They move among you, indistinguishable from those with vibrant auras. It's another reminder that the world you know is just a surface. One thin, fragile layer concealing a deeper, darker reality. But without a strong connection to the other side, they aren't worth much. Not for harvesting, at least. They lack the flavor, the richness of those with true auras. However, the stranger continues, his voice dropping to a murmur, hunger has a way of bending rules. Sometimes they'll be used too. When the appetite is desperate enough, it's just a matter of necessity. His last words barely reach you, the weight of them lost as your gaze drifts to the crowd beyond. People move about carrying groceries, laughing with friends, lost in their own worlds, each oblivious to the truth hidden behind the veil. This was your world once, the place where you lived, loved, and fought to carve out a sense of meaning. Now everything seems like a mask, an illusion so thin that you wonder how you ever believed in it. Despair begins to rise, a creeping tide that fills your chest with cold dread. You feel the threads of your reality unraveling, and your grip on what you thought you knew begins to slip. How can you go back to the life you once led, knowing what lies beneath? How can you walk among people, knowing they are surrounded by creatures waiting to feed? Your eyes fix on the goggles in your hand, the pink lenses catching the light. Even if you found someone to tell, someone who might believe you, what then? Would they allow you to speak? Would they let you walk away, armed with the knowledge of their existence? Deep down, you already know the answer. The feeling of being watched lingers, a presence that isn't tethered to a single gaze but is everywhere, watching every move you make. You know there's no escape. The goggles may reveal the truth, but they also mark you as one who knows too much. And in this world, that is a dangerous thing. 1,000 questions swirl in your mind, each one clawing at your sanity. Why would they let this stranger reveal such truths to you? Who is he really? You think back to when you first met, but the memory feels hazy, like trying to grasp smoke. Did he ever give you his name, or did you simply accept his presence without question? Why? And why, above all, can he see without the goggles? The realization hits you like a cold shock. Your heart races, and you slowly turn your head, the dread building with each inch. Your eyes meet his, And in that moment you watch as the shape of him begins to shift. His features twist and ripple, his human guise melting away like a mask dissolved by water. His limbs elongate, the flesh becoming translucent and fractal, bending in ways that defy understanding. You want to scream, to move, but your body remains frozen as parts of his form, unnatural, writhing tendrils, stretching out and sink into you, twitching and convulsive, while the terror of the situation reveals itself to you in ruthless clarity. The moment your predator finally embraces you with all his ethereal fangs and claws, a searing pain courses through your body, every nerve aflame, and the world around you blurs into a spiral of agony and fear. The colors twist, the sounds distort, and everything is swallowed by a wave of burning, blinding pain. Through the haze, as the darkness begins to swallow your senses, you hear it. A whisper slithering into your mind. Delicious. It's the last sensation you feel, a faint echo of joy that chills you to the bone before the world fades into darkness. A child playing nearby pauses, his eyes catching the sight of a man leaning heavily against a bench, his hand clutching at his chest. The man's face contorts in pain, a silent grimace that twists his features. The child's ball rolls away, forgotten, as he watches the man collapse, his body crumpling to the ground like a marionette with its strings cut. The park stirs to life around him. People rushing, shouts filling the air, and hands reaching out to assist. Someone yells for an ambulance and others crowd around, their voices a mixture of panic and urgency. The child stands frozen, his small eyes wide, taking in the scene with an innocent confusion. When the emergency services arrive, their faces are grim, their motions efficient. Minutes tick by as they work, their efforts precise, but ultimately futile. In the end, they step back, their expressions resigned, and one of them pulls a sheet over the man's still form. The official report will be simple, clinical. A heart attack. Nothing more, nothing less. The park quiets again, and the onlookers disperse, returning to their lives. Only the child lingers, staring at the spot where the man fell, his ball lying still in the grass, as if sensing the echo of something unseen. Something that lingers just beyond the veil of the ordinary. "And that," the old man says, his voice fading like the last whisper of a breeze, "is where our story ends, young man." You sit there, the weight of his words settling deep within you, like a stone dropped into the still waters of your mind, sending ripples through everything you once believed to be true. The sky above, once bright and clear, now feels distant, like a veil thinly stretched over something far darker. Dread mixes with wonder in your chest, a tug-of-war between the desire to dismiss it all as a fabrication and the nagging suspicion that you've glimpsed a truth too terrible to comprehend. You turn, ready to thank the old man for the tale, a story far more unsettling than anything you could have imagined, but the bench beside you is empty, and the book you brought with you lies in his place instead. The title reads, "Disneyland of the Gods."